it's a very, very important skill to be able to summarize, what you've been learning so that you know, okay, this is where I am. I'm starting from here. I know this, and 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 I'm right here. Okay, now I'm ready to go. So it's very, very important. Okay. So how did we get here? Before we continue. So remember the question that the king asked was, do you remember?
So about putting human characteristics to Hashem.
Okay, so before that, how did he get to it? Because the rabbi taught the king about Yetziat Mitzrayim. All these wondrous things took place, wonderful, amazing miracles. Those miracles prove that it wasn't mikre, it wasn't accidental, it wasn't by chance, it wasn't some sort of magical spell or anything else. It was simply the will of God. So then the king says, yeah, you're right. I mean, this is what happened, and that's what the Torah says, so okay. So that explains why you people view God in human terms. So says the rabbi, wait. What are you talking about? What do you mean human terms? Not only do we don't envision things that God created in human terms, like the soul. How much more so God? And so he gives a very short explanation of how we understand human terms when they are applied to God, to say that they're not really applying its metaphors. So then the king says, okay, so I guess you guys are like the philosophers, you want to say? He says, yeah, just like the philosophers who distance any human form or body to God, we, the Jewish people, believe the same. So then the king says, okay, then why did you build an idol? Do you see how it all works? One follows the other, right? So the rabbi says to the king, first of all, you have to understand that these people were at a very, very high level. And when you're at a very high level, the mistakes that you make seem to be very, very big because of the level of spirituality that you reach. That's where we are.
Not at that spiritual level, but you have the capacity to be at such a spiritual level. Are your mistakes still able to be that great?
No. Capacity, it doesn't imply actuality. I have the capacity to win the Nobel Prize of Chemistry. Does that mean that I won it? Right? So Bernie has the capacity to be the greatest rapper the world has ever seen. Does it mean that he already is? No. He still needs to beat pop a little better. He needs to get his rhyme a little quicker, a little sharper turns, Yeah. He's got to use his thumb more.
So do the greater...
And he's missing that Mercedes-Benz, necklace. I mean, that you can't be a rapper without it, right?
So the greater you become,
then once you're there, then the mistakes are
greater.
Correct. Yeah.
Even if they seem minuscule, they could be.
Yeah. It all depends on the perception. So he says, okay, fine. So he says, he's trying to explain to the king what the difference is between Bnei Israel before getting the Torah and the rest of the people, the rest of the world. So he says, the rabbi says, all the nations at that time used to worship idols, images. So that even if they had philosophers back then, did they have philosophers back then? Yes or no? What do you think? Sure. The answer is no. See, you all say yes, but it's not. Because when does philosophy start? Where does philosophy start?
Greece.
Greece. Around what period? Around the 5th and 5th century BCE. When was Egypt? So we say about 1300 BCE. So it's about 1,000 years earlier. 1,000 years earlier. Remember that when the temple was destroyed, Plato and Aristotle weren't even around yet. Or if they were around, they were not writing anything worth reading. Because that was in 586. The Babylonians destroyed the temple. Okay? It's just very important to hold cup in Jewish history. So that you have an idea of what we're talking about. So the E says, if the philosophers would bring a proof back then on the unity of God and the nature of God, they certainly would not create a theory that does not have an image. That is, even they would have an image. That they would say that God connects to this image in order to affect the physical world. What does that mean? Isaac?
It means that the philosophers seem to be based on what is the accepted conventional outlook at the time.
So not only philosophers, everybody. Everybody. So in every sort of generation, every period in intellectual history, the greatest thinkers, the greatest minds operate under the, how shall we say, the ideas of that generation. So if you live in a society and all the societies around you, that time everybody prays to idols, even the greatest thinkers, the philosophers, would say God has no body, they would somehow make a connection between that God that has no body to this image, to this statue. Because they could not imagine that God could have an effect on the physical world without a connection to something physical. That's what he's saying. So, continues, and he says, right? And whoever does create this sort of relationship to God, in the way that we do today in many places, that we see that there are the spiritual effect. Here he's talking about the effects of the stars, which appears to be some effect in astrology. But we do have places where the earth is important. Like what? Give me a place on earth that Judaism says that this place is holy.
Temple Mount.
Temple Mount. What else?
Hebron.
Hebron. What else? Bet Knesset. Right? You take a bunch of stones and some wood and you build a little, what you call it, a house? Call it a cabin? I don't know what you want to call it. Right? You build something, a structure, and by virtue of that structure, what happens? It has holiness. Did it have holiness before you built the structure? So he says, we see that back then, people would not agree to follow a Torah unless there was some sort of intermediary between them and God. Some sort of intermediary. והיו בני ישראל מצפים למה שיעד אותם משה. And the children of Israel were expecting to receive what Moshe Rabbeinu told them. That there was going to be a pillar of fire and a cloud, right? That is, there was a pillar of fire and a cloud that sort of told them that God is connected to them. There were two physical entities that helped them connect to God. They saw it. And they were looking for other things that are parallel to this. Okay? That's what they were looking for. That's what he's saying. Therefore, וכן היו מקבילים עמוד הענן, אשר היה יורד על משה בדבר איתו האלוקים, והיו עובדים בני ישראל המשתחווים, נכחו לאלוקים. And when God spoke to Moshe Rabbeinu, there was a cloud. A cloud appeared over him. And people bowed down in the presence of God. But what did they see? They saw the cloud. Yitzchak, you're with me? So where is he going? Where's he going with this?
They needed something physical to connect them to Hashem.
Correct. They needed something physical connected to Hashem. So when Moshe Rabbeinu went up to Har Sinai to get the commandments, right? They heard from God himself the 10 commandments, and Moshe went up the mountain to bring them the tablets and to create an aron for them. So he says the purpose of the aron. What's the aron? The tabernacle. What was the purpose of the tabernacle? So they have something to turn their attention towards. So that's so bad, Bernie? Isn't it? Understandable what they were trying to do? You all are agreeing, but you're forgetting the second commandment in the Torah. What did God tell them? Don't make anything. Don't.
But it's still understandable. I mean,
it's not understandable because
why?
God appears to you and says, don't do X.
Right.
Okay, and you're like, got it, I won't do X.
Expecting,
and you're like this, don't do X, don't do X, don't do X, don't do X. Oh, I'm doing X.
But you're expecting a people who are inherently, they're human beings, they're inherently flawed, coming from a place that have...
Inherently flawed, but remember, these people merited seeing God. They are, right,
That doesn't mean they're not flawed.
They're not perfect, of course not. But they're on a higher spiritual level than us. You're going to make an image? Are you, Gil? You're going to make an image now?
If Hashem tells me to, I will.
But he told you not to.
So I won't.
Of course we wouldn't. We're in a cultural paradigm where we wouldn't. That's what isn't that the point we're trying to bring out with the generation of Sinai?
So, but if we are in a cultural paradigm that says that we would, and God told you that you wouldn't, which overrides what? That's the challenge. So the Yehuda Levi, the rabbi is saying, look, the cultural paradigm said everyone had images. So they made a mistake.
But Hashem doesn't say, like, you couldn't make anything. It's just images. Like the Aaron isn't an image.
The Egel.
It's an image.
Oh.
No, I understand.
Right? That's the problem.
So if they would have gone any other way, like if they would have made a block, would have been okay?
No. The only intermediary that you're allowed is what God told you that you could make. The tabernacle, the dimensions of the aron of the tabernacle were given by God. He says to Moshe, you build this. Why do you need to build it? Because what is he going to put inside? The tablets, Torah, Tzintzenet Aman, right? A little jar of the man. Right? That's what's going to happen here. So he says, the idea of the tabernacle was that they have something to turn their attention to. So That's the idea. And so the people remained around the mountain waiting for Moshe Rabbeinu, right? And they didn't change their clothes. They didn't do it. They're just standing there waiting. And they're waiting and waiting and waiting. And guess what? What happened? He's not coming down. How long was he gone for?
40 days.
And? Good. Did you take any food with them? With him? Did you take a change of clothes? Water? Nothing. And he says, ובושש מהם 40 יום והוא לא לקח צידה ולא נפרד מהם. He left as if he's going to be right back. Just imagine going on a date and the girl says, I'll be right back. How long would you wait before you'd say, I guess she's not coming back? An hour?
No, maybe like 10 minutes, 15.
10, 15 minutes?
Maybe she's got business in the bathroom.
What do you think? Bernie, how long would you wait? 20 minutes after that, that's it? 20 minutes. What about 40 days? That's a little stalkerish, huh?
I go check on her.
Then you're stalking. Hey, right, you know. Are you okay? Oh my God, he's still there. Call the police. 40 days they're standing there. So he says, look at what the rabbi says. אז גברה המחשבה הרעה על קצת ההמון. So a bad thought, a bad idea comes into the mind of some of the people. And the people started joining different camps. That is, people had different ideas of what to do. Right? So he says, and all sorts of ideas. Some people say we do this, some people say we do that. He says, some of the people said, let us serve something that is physical. That's what all the other human beings on earth do. They have an image that they use in order to pray to God. So let's just do it, and it doesn't mean that we deny that God took us out of Egypt. But it's going to be parallel to God so that we can connect to it. Just like the Philistines, right? The Philistines, when there was a battle it's in Shmuel. The Philistines won one battle. So then the decision was made to bring the Aron HaKodesh into the battlefield. And it didn't turn out so well. Because not only did they lose the battle, but they also lost the Aron HaKodesh. Like, could you imagine when they would come back from the battlefield? Like, where's the Aron HaKodesh? Oh, funny you should ask. Well, you're not going to believe this. What is it? Where is it? Kind of lost it. What do you mean you lost it? Yeah, the Philistines got it. It's only David HaMelech went and brought it back, right? The Philistines put it in their Avodah Zarah Mikdash, and all the statues fell down, and there's a whole this, and so they just took it and put it in the middle of a field. They're like, we don't want this Aron Kodesh business. Like, but you just imagine, like, the soldiers come back and they say, where's the Aron Kodesh? Yeah, don't know. I was too busy running, running away. It's like, it's a big deal, right? Do you know where the Aron HaKodesh is these days? Hmm? You do? Where?
Buried underneath the Temple Mount.
Okay, that's one idea.
Isn't there a story that like someone like some guy like fell into like a hole and like he saw like the Nora and the Aron Kodesh and he went to a rabbi and like described everything. The rabbi said, yeah, don't tell anybody. And like the idea is that God will like let someone know just so like the knowledge is.
I don't know. I'm just asking. No, I don't. So he says this is what really happened. Their sin was B'tziyur asher nesar alehem, that they imagined something that they shouldn't have. And they related the quality of connection to God to what they created with their own hands, without God commanding them. If God commanded them to build something, would that be a problem?
No.
No. The problem was that he didn't command them. So they shouldn't have done anything. Shev ve'al ta'aseh. Right? Don't do anything. Just wait.
So why did this merit that Hashem decided never to openly open himself to a mass group again?
Well, why do you learn that from here?
No, because then we learn that after the building of the Egel, Hashem said that he wouldn't reveal himself to like a mass group ever again.
Not because of the Egel. Not because of the Egel, I don't think.
It wasn't because I thought we learned. I thought that's what you said.
Me?
Yeah.
No. Hope not. If I did, I take it back. No, I don't think so. It says in Dvarim that he says that it's not, never this never happened to any people. But remember, the reason that God did not, that the prophecy or the connection to all Bnei Israel, the reason that it stopped was because they said, we can't handle it anymore. Please stop.
Okay.
They couldn't experience it on the level that they did. It was too much for them. So it's not that God appeared, they screwed up, and he says, I'm not doing it again, because you're going to screw this up again. No, they said, we just can't handle this. Because remember, the Midrash says that their souls blew out of their bodies. Right? So that the soul stayed and the body flew back. And then he resurrected them, and here we go again. At some point, they said, I can't take this. So, okay. ויש להם התנצלות במה שקדם המחלוקת ביניהם. And he says, there's also, you have to put it in context of what really happened. Why? That only 3,000 people worshipped the idol, or were around the idol. How many Jews were there at the time?
3 million.
So 600,000 men between the ages of 20 and up, right? So out of the men, there were only 3,000 men. So even though it was a mistake, and they shouldn't have done it, does that mean that everybody screwed up? Only 3,000 screwed up. They made a mistake. So he says, that he says something very interesting. But we have to understand that they were the leaders of the nation, helped them create this. So that's the question, why? Why did Aaron, right, help them in creating the golden calf? So he says, very interesting, שיראה הממרא מהימין כדי להרוג הממרא העובד איתו. ויחשב להם לעוון. So this is really the purpose of what happened there. Was that to differentiate between the person who is evil and the person who worships Hashem. That's the idea. Right? That you have to sort of have a distinction between the two. That's the explanation of the Otzar Nechmad here. That really the idea was till Moshe Rabbeinu is going to come and he's going to judge them. And Aaron did not want to be in the way. So that's how he understands. That Aaron thought that it's better that he would be silent about it, and that the people who are fully involved in it will be punished. And he says it's still, even though they did what they did. And Aaron said, look, I didn't get in the way, but, don't blame me. And says the Kuzari, no. We see from the Torah that God was mad at Aaron also.
What was the reason why he assisted them to make it?
He wanted to differentiate between those who believe in Hashem and who don't.
Why did he have to help? He could have just stepped back and not gotten involved.
Way to just look.
That's a good question. That's what he's faulted by the Torah. That's what the Kuzari is saying. That wasn't enough. No, it wasn't enough. That is, the fact that you just sort of, took the gold and threw it in and pops out this little cute golden calf is not enough. You're still culpable for what
You
happened.
shouldn't have done anything, yeah.
That's what the Otzer Nechman says. שאם כל זה נחשב זה לעוון. Why? Because it says בארון התענף השם מאוד להשמידו. Because God wanted to destroy Aaron for his role. Remember, we learned that really Aaron feared for his life. Because they already killed one person. And he knew that this mob is not going to stop so he figured, okay.
How many commandments did they break during this Egel?
It depends on of what do you think they did around the Egel. Avodah Zarah for sure, murder for sure. And then if you understand the mitzachik as arayas, then it's arayas.
That's alright.
Inappropriate sexual contact. So the issue was Adko, up to now, what was their sin? They only sinned in their mind. They thought that they wanted to create an idol so that they can have something as an intermediary between them and God. That's what they wanted. They only thought about it. But then what happened? That the gold that Aaron threw in the fire brought about the actuality of their thought. Something very interesting. What if they would have thought about something else? Let's say they thought to give all this gold to tzedakah. And they said to Aaron, go and we want you to throw it into the fire. And they had in mind to give it to the tzedakah. So what would happen? An idol would jump out? Yeah, right. That's what the idea is. That there's something miraculous about what was happening, because the Midrash says, right, that Aaron took it and just threw it and an idol popped out. Because that was that's what they thought, that's what they wanted. And God said, I'll give you what you want. I'll give you what you want. So, ולא היה העוון ההוא יציאה מכלל מוציאה ממצרים. And we see from this sin that they still believed in Hashem. They still believed in Hashem, that God took him out of Egypt and did all these miracles, all of these things. Even though they had a golden calf. Still, for them, this was an intermediary to God because they needed some sort of a physical entity to connect to. That's what says the Kuzari here.
Is he trying to justify it?
He's trying to explain it. He's trying to explain it. Not justify, because he blames them. Everybody says it's a sin. It was terrible. But the question is, what was the nature of the sin? Did they make a god? Were they idol worshipping? Right? Were they praying to this idol? No. Did they create the idol themselves physically? No. It was something in their mind. This is why he says that they were in a very high level. And when you're in that high level, even the thoughts that you think have implications. Because how many times you think of things that you shouldn't be thinking about They don't come about, do they? Do they just pop right out?
You have to put action to it.
They don't.
Sometimes.
Like if the person thinks of eating, I don't know, shrimp. Does he have, a bowl of shrimp in front of him? No. What? What are you doing this?
Sometimes.
Yes?
Could happen.
Could happen? What does that mean? Can you help me?
You've never
What are you
thought about
talking about?
something and then it's right in front of you?
No?
Yeah, you think about it. Somebody walks by with a bowl of shrimp and just drops it. It's a weird happenstance.
How often has that happened to
It's
you?
a pretty big test. But
Yeah.
sometimes.
No, but they simply had a thought of creating and then boom, comes an idol. And they're judged for what came out. Did they do anything?
They didn't do anything?
What did they do?
They thought.
They thought it.
That's wrong?
Yes,
But they didn't actually do it.
correct. Yet,
But in their case, it was wrong because it could become an actual thing.
and it did.
They
That
also
was.
served it after it popped out.
Nachon.
That's
But that is maybe a Gilui Milta. To show like this is why it came out, because this is what you wanted, and hence you're going to be guilty to the worst level that we can make you guilty of. What if they threw everything take all their gold and throw it in the fire, and nothing would have popped out?
Poor people. I feel
Right?
so bad for them.
If you take gold, if you collect a bunch of gold and throw it in the fire, would anything come out? No.
But would they have still been judged for trying?
I don't know. Certainly it's a chet. It's a type of chet. You need kapara, but it's not the same as avodah zarah.
So why do we consider that something that's really bad? It's like one of the worst sins, right?
Yeah.
So their goal wasn't to bow down to an idol,
Correct.
but
But they wanted an intermediary.
But in our history, that's one of the worst things.
But they wanted an intermediary when God told them they don't need one. And they did not have permission from God to create one. Because what is the basis for Judaism? Is that God commands and you follow His commandments. Zeh. Right? In order to do that, it doesn't mean you're a robot. You have to think about it. You have to understand of what the mitzvah is and all the ramifications of it. But it's essentially you have commandments from Hashem that you have to fulfill. The things you shouldn't do and things that you should do. It's very simple. Judaism in a nutshell. But here, you look puzzled or bothered or all of the above.
Who's this person that killed?
What?
Who is this person that killed?
Who?
Seems like the worst thing they did.
That's pretty bad.
Because it was even a direct action.
Yeah. Right?
How did they get driven to that?
What?
How did they get driven to that?
Because they wanted someone to create an idol for them.
What about the age-old thing? He says, don't think about elephants. What are you thinking about? You're thinking about elephants. So it's like you can't control where your brain goes sometimes, even if it's not necessarily what you want.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So, are you saying that they are excused? Because God planted this idea when He told them, no idols. No idols, no idols, no idols, 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 idols. What?
Now they're thinking about it.
But it's only 3,000 out of 600,000. Work it out, see what percentage it is. Right, 0.5%. Right? Okay, let's stop here so they can daven mincha and we'll continue because he has a very, very good explanation of what happens next. So we'll continue tomorrow.